American taxpayers are getting ripped off by TransDigm, a company that makes and sells aftermarket aircraft parts to the Pentagon and the commercial airline industry. The company's price gouging is made abundantly clear in a new investigative report by Forbes, where staff writer Jeremy Bogaski basically reveals TransDigm's profit maximizing strategy. What they do is they buy up companies that happen to be the only ones making particular aircraft parts, and then they jack up prices for customers who basically have no other alternatives. A former employee described TransDigm as a cancer, literally. Another told Forbes that the company is the Satan of aircraft parts. Now, reviews by the Pentagon's Inspector General in both 2019 and 2021 found that immediately after acquiring a company, TransDigm raised prices on 44 out of 46 items and reaped profit margins as high as 4,436% over the 15% that investigators deemed reasonable. And guess what? This was all legal. And you know who's paying for the price of all of this? We are, in the form of increased defense spending and of course higher prices for flights when we travel. Overcharging for spare parts alone may have inflated defense spending by billions of dollars over the past 2 decades, according to Pentagon audits that looked at a universe of companies beyond just TransDigm. A review of a 2018 contract with a TransDigm unit found that the military would pay $119.3 million over 10 years for 100 parts that should have cost just $28.3 million, which still seems pretty high. But again, $9 million a year up in smoke based on this price gouging that they discovered through the audit. And since airlines are the company's biggest customers, travelers are paying higher fares for flights due to what the House Oversight Committee has called TransDigm's abusive pricing practices. The expensive nature of the aviation industry, unfortunately, makes it easier for TransDigm to get away with what they're doing, or at least hide what they're doing. Because every part on a commercial aircraft, along with the methods for manufacturing them, has to be certified as safe and reliable by the Federal Aviation Administration. As a result, it's a super time-consuming and expensive process. And even as TransDigm implements these outrageous price hikes, customers, like commercial airline companies, avoid seeking out less expensive alternatives because TransDigm's products remain a pretty small part of the overall cost of building an aircraft. So on top of that, TransDigm also keeps buying up companies only to dominate the aftermarket parts industry. And they raise prices on these parts that customers can't get anywhere else. So one example is the case of a quick disconnect coupling half, a small part that allows for the rapid connection and disconnection of fluid lines without tools. TransDigm sold it to the Pentagon in 2017 at a price that amounted to a 219% a year increase from 1999, or I should say 1991. On a subsequent purchase for the same price in 2018, the Inspector General determined TransDigm booked an excess profit margin of 1,698%. I mean, the greed is unbelievable. And it costs close to nothing to make these parts relative to what TransDigm is charging for them. House Democrats revealed that the Inspector General found it cost TransDigm just $173 to make a quick disconnect coupling that it then later sold to the Pentagon for $6,986. And take a look at this graph, which shows the 5 types of spare parts TransDigm sold to the Defense Department with profit margins as high as 4,436%. So the green portion basically represents how much it costs for TransDigm to make the product. And then the largest portion, which is the blue portion, depicts how much the company charged for the parts. So just one example, while it costs TransDigm around like $1,000 to produce actuator cover assemblies, They charge close to $13,000 for it, which of course is much more than the 15% profit margin that the Inspector General argues is an acceptable markup for profits for the product. Now, if you're wondering how the Pentagon can get screwed over like this, well, unsurprisingly, the weak regulatory environment is definitely to blame. It's nearly impossible for the Defense Department to negotiate better deals with TransDigm because the company has been able to refuse the government's request for cost information in order to gauge the fairness of its pricing. By law, military contractors don't even have to produce cost data on transactions below $2 million. The regulation actually used to be even weaker prior to 2018 when Congress raised the limit from $750,000. Now, following those changes, as small as they might be, it was easier for regulators to determine that the government was being overcharged and screwed over for parts sold by TransDigm. After getting pummeled in the 2019 hearing over the Pentagon Inspector General's findings, the company complied with a request to refund $16.1 million in overcharges. TransDigm has so far stiff-armed the Defense Department on another request to return $20.8 million in excess profit found in a 2021 follow-up review. Now, in an attempt to explain themselves, the company claims that the 15% profit limit noted in the Inspector General's report is arbitrary, and the review's methodology is flawed because it excluded legitimate costs. It'd be nice if they elaborated on what those costs are exactly, because based on these investigations, we see that they spend a tiny amount of money to make the parts, and then they price gouge the crap out of the Defense Department and the airline industry. But there's also some concern that TransDigm broke disclosure rules, including their failing to report that TransDigm was the owner of 12 subsidiaries that bid for Pentagon contracts. The lack of transparency makes it much harder for the military to track TransDigm's price hikes and possible price gouging. I don't even know why I'm saying possible price gouging, because multiple investigations have shown that they're definitely price gouging. Then there's the airline industry, which is also shelling out steep prices for TransDigm's parts and then, of course, transferring those costs onto us. A former employee at one of its subsidiaries, known as Avtech Tyee, told Forbes that airlines hate TransDigm with a passion, but they have no choice. You don't like it, your plane doesn't fly. Because they've cornered the market by buying up all other companies that make these parts. Also, the CEO of GA Telesis, which repairs planes and distributes parts, agrees and sheds light on how TransDigm buys up other aftermarket parts companies in order to monopolize the market. So he says that the airline customers complain to Boeing that TransDigm prices are high, and that's making it hard to manage costs. But Boeing didn't contract TransDigm to make these parts. Boeing contracted a company that TransDigm bought. Now, investors absolutely love TransDigm's greedy little business model. How could they not? It translates to a sweet return on investment for shareholders as the company basically rips off the Defense Department and American taxpayers. But based on accusations from former employees, TransDigm could also be engaging in financial fraud. I wonder how the shareholders feel about that. So at TransDigm subsidiary Avtech Tyee, pressure to perform led managers to commit fraud, according to a former employee, Phyllis Santisteven Sullivan, who was the company's finance chief and worked there from 2018 until she was fired in May of 2021. Now, she filed a lawsuit because she says that she was wrongfully terminated after she had pushed back on these practices. And in that February lawsuit, she claimed that the company improperly sped up booking revenue to meet aggressive quarterly financial targets and pushed favorable numbers into the future. She also said that she found that $400,000 worth of revenue was improperly booked on a new project for Boeing, even though no product was shipped, nor was Boeing invoiced. So if her accusations are true, that's definitely fraud. In addition to that, she alleged that the company sent a prototype part to defense giant Lockheed Martin in 2019, almost a year before it was ready, so that hundreds of thousands of dollars in revenue could be recorded in that quarter. But guess what? Since they sent that part to Lockheed early and prematurely, and it wasn't ready yet, Lockheed sent it back. The former Avtech Tyee employee who spoke anonymously corroborated these accounts of the Lockheed Martin incident, but said she was wrong in one respect. The part had actually been shipped to Lockheed prematurely twice to book milestone payments. By the second time, they were no longer really enjoying us very much, he said. So while shareholders are definitely happy in the moment because of these maximized profits, if it is in fact proven that this company has been defrauding them through this lawsuit, I'm sure they'll be, singing a different tune. In fact, I'm pretty sure that the only way executives for this company would face real consequences for their actions is if they're found to have lied to investors. I mean, who cares that they're price gouging ordinary Americans through the Defense Department, right? But for now, the price gouging and possible financial fraud is paying off handsomely for TransDigm's executives. I mean, take a look at this. Since TransDigm went public back in 2006, Forbes estimates that its CEO, Hawley, has amassed a fortune of $1.1 billion. That's billion with a B. That's based on his disclosures of TransDigm stock sales and publicly reported CEO compensation before he stepped down to become board chair in 2018. And guess what? Unsurprisingly, Hawley isn't the only TransDigm executive who's gotten rich by these schemes. The company awards big stock option packages to executives, including the managers of its subsidiaries, contingent on meeting ambitious financial goals. And by the way, those financial goals, of course, I think incentivize potential financial fraud. Again, we'll see if those accusations have any merit behind them once this lawsuit is over. But one other person says it's made many people quite wealthy. You know who that other person is? The former vice chairman of TransDigm. He said that because he would know firsthand just how wealthy these schemes are making the executives for this company. So every year when we see members of Congress without question approve increases in funding for the military, don't let anyone lie to you and make you think that those increases in spending, the $800+ billion that we allocate for the Pentagon every year, that it goes to benefit rank and file soldiers, ordinary people who are fighting to protect our country. They get raises here and there, but for the most part, the reason why our military budget is so inflated is because private military contractors are able to price gouge us and get away with it. And the fact that we have this weak regulatory system in place that essentially allows for them to skirt disclosure rules tells you everything you need to know about how weak these regulations really are. This is our money. We work really hard in order to obviously provide a living for ourselves, but we also provide revenue for the federal government. To see it get misused by this, to see it basically make these corporate CEOs as wealthy as these guys are, absolutely makes me sick, and we shouldn't accept it. The fact that they've had multiple House hearings about this company alone should make you want to rip your hair out. How many hearings are we gonna have until members of Congress do what they need to do to strengthen regulations and prevent the federal government from getting price gouged by these private contractors? That's the real question here.
Thanks for watching The Young Turks, really appreciate it. Another way to show support is through YouTube memberships. You'll get to interact with us more. There's live chat emojis, badges. You've got emojis of me, Anna, John, JR. So those are super fun. But you also get playback of our exclusive member-only shows and specials right after they air. So all of that, all you gotta do is click that join button right underneath the video. Thank you.